Hello, my name is John Richards. I'm the JADE Plant Manager, and today we're going to talk about security. Security is one of those subjects that gets our industry into the press from time to time. Demonstrates how important this is to both us and our customers. So we're going to have a look at what JADE has been doing in this area for the last couple of releases. So let's start with some background. JADE traditionally has been secure in the fact that we have proprietary software in the structure of our database and so forth, and we've relied on environmental security in terms of communication. But we need much better defences as we're going forward. So following 2018, we embarked on a security review. And today we'll talk about what criteria we used to judge how we were handling security, what threats we were considering, and what we've done about that, both in a 2018 security patch and later on in 2020. But it's important to notice that the things that we discovered during the security review, the criteria that we use to evaluate elements of the product, we continue that on through to any ongoing new features that are coming through. So it's now embedded into our way of working. So the principles that we looked at during the security review, or we worked with, the criteria, the aspirations, if you like, of the review were these. We wanted defence in depth, and defence in depth is not a new concept. It's been around for physical security for centuries. But it's a key part of what we do. We make sure that once people are in, there are barriers to privileged APIs and so forth. We minimise the attack surface. Obviously, the number of ways people can inappropriately get into your software are reduced. We encrypt. We're trying to encrypt data when it is at rest, and we're going to work on the basis, or we are working on the basis, that access should be denied by default. We guarantee the integrity both of the data and of the code, and we'll talk about a bit more when we get to the threats. We authenticate and authorize operations. That means we check who you are and that you're entitled or approved to do the action you're going to take. And of course, secure communication to make sure that both JADE to JADE communication and JADE to the outside world communication is secured. So what were the threats we were considering? Well, obviously, to start with, the bypassing of authorization. That's quite key for keeping people out of parts of your system they shouldn't be in. Code tampering. Obviously, the code that you have created for your system must be guaranteed integrity of. And also, not just tampering with your code, but injecting their own code into parts of the system, parts of your code path that could inadvertently be run. So privilege escalation is quite a common thing. You would concern that people who come in to do low-level privileged work cannot get access to privileged APIs. Intercepting data in transit. We talked about communication and how we need to secure that in the various ways that it occurs in a JADE environment. Unauthorized access to data at rest. Obviously, we don't want people being able to get access to your database. So the process. The first off was defining the scope, and that was quite a significant piece of work. JADE is now, after many years, developed into quite a big product and required a lot of diagramming of the product to ensure that we were reviewing all aspects of the product and making sure we hadn't missed anything. So defining the scope was to picture the product diagrammatically and then make significant checklists to ensure that we were looking at every avenue of security. So then we had to establish the principles that we've just spoken about and the criteria to be used to review not just the current code base, but also any subsequent new work. We then identified and investigated the vulnerabilities. Now, this was quite a lengthy process too, because you can say, so if someone can get in at this particular point, what can they do? And sometimes we had to almost prototype those threats to make sure we were covering all the angles and giving realistic mitigation to the various options for vulnerabilities. So from that, we built a prioritized backlist. I mean, obviously, a backlog rather. Obviously, there's a lot of areas to look at. Some of the things that we found were quite trivial, and therefore we could put off for a while. Some were quite significant, and we needed to take immediate action. So once that process had finished, there was quite a significant peer review. Product the size of JADE, no one person can know the whole product, and certainly not at depth. So once our security lead had done a lot of this work, he then had to talk to subject matter experts to make sure he had evaluated the vulnerabilities correctly and come up with the right sort of mitigation. So the steps taken. The first one was that we did a hot fix in 2018 for a couple of vulnerabilities, one in workspaces and the other one in report writer, and that went out as a hot fix. And then the rest of the work was largely done in 2020. So there were various internal changes to ensure that people couldn't get access to privileged APIs. That was the main motivation around some of the internal changes. One of the other things that I'll take the opportunity to talk about here is unpublished root schema methods. Now, we don't publish them for a good reason, and that is that they are internal to us, and we often, if we change them, you won't know because they're not published, and so you don't know the details. But over the years, many people have found root schema, unpublished root schema methods by various means, and then based solely on the name of the method and the parameters involved, they've guessed at what the method does and have used it based into the system. So some of those, some of the privileged activity of some of those unpublished methods has been removed. So you might find unpublished root schema methods that you're using may no longer work the way you think they are. I would, of course, discourage anybody from using an unpublished method from anywhere. It's not good practice. If you don't know the intention of the person who wrote the method, then you shouldn't be using it. So please do not use any of our root schema methods that are not published. We provided in 2020 SSL security over the primary to SDS communication and the IIS web services. So as you can hear in the REST presentation, if you have a look at that, there is a section there we talk about security that has now been added to the REST feature. And also within the development environment, the inspector module has not been previously identified by the security module for the IDE, and now it is, so you can check who is inspecting what and whether you want to allow them to do that or not. So JADE to JADE connections. Up till 2020, only thin client to the app server and the TCP/IP connection class could be secured with SSL. So that was the only two areas. So in 2020, we now secure primary to secondary and the JADE HTTP to the client. So here's a diagram that should clarify. So pre-2020 is the purple dotted line, so it's the thin client and the external components via TCP IP connection. Then in 2020, we've got the secondary server and JADE HTTP DLL. And then planned for a 2020 service pack will be the FAT client to the DB server, the .NET client, and the ODBC client. So those will be additional in the 2020 service pack. So the next steps, as we said, the JADE FAT client, .NET client, ODBC thin client. And one of the other things that will be into the 2020 service pack, which does have a bearing on security, is to enable opportunistic TLS on the TCP/IP connection. And the most common use that this will is in Office 365 in the mail. So part of the Office 365, there is the option of starting the process unsecured and then wanting to raise the security midway along the process. And we haven't in the past, and we don't at the moment enable that, but we will do that will be coming in 2020 service pack. Encrypting JADE to JADE connections. The current encryption for the JADE thin client to app server connection uses Open SSL. But the new ones in 2020 and coming in the 2020 service pack will use the Microsoft Secure Channel or S channel. The JADE thin client to app server connection will, at some stage in the future, be changed to use S channel. Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, because this is not live, you can't ask any questions. But if you do have any concerns about security, please raise them through JADE support. Thank you very much.